Good morning, watchers. Welcome to Brother Sal's Sunday Gathering at the Storehouse, our weekly commentary on world events. We first started in 1996 and have become more relevant ever since. Today, posting 2 shows per week to our YouTube channels, BroSal and Philadelphia Church. For 20 years, we have integrated the historical landscape that unfolds daily with the prophetic analysis anticipated by eschatology. We bring you non-traditional insights and uncensored discussion of issues purposely ignored by media of all kinds. Join us now for the only discussion of its kind. And joining me again this week is my son, Tony. Welcome, Tony. What do you have for us?
Hi, Dad. Good morning. Thanks for having me on. I've been going through the news this week, and it's, boy, oh boy, it seems to be coming together in a way similar to what we've been anticipating for quite a while. And I find this week there's some conflicting stuff that's really, I think, going to bring about the deeper changes that are soon to happen, or the escalation, I guess, would be the better way to put it, Dad. But there's a couple articles I think are worth getting into just a little bit to set the stage of where we're at, and then a bunch of the headlines that I think fill in the blanks or support it. The first one is Business Insider from the 11th by Armin Rosen. Says, title of this says, Western diplomat on Syria conflict. Quote, it'll be easy to get a ceasefire soon because the opposition will all be dead. It'll be easy to get a ceasefire soon because the opposition will all be dead. That's just a Business Insider article from February 11th, 2016 by Armin Rosen. And of course, it starts with a very convincing shot of a single sniper on what looks like, to me, because of the way it's built with the rocks, what you can see in the foreground is the rocks stacked purposefully like a barrier with some sort of sheeting in between them. I mean, it doesn't look like something that was done in haste so much. Could be a practice range. Anyway, it's one clean guy with his rifle. You see him from a sort of an angle that doesn't show any of the surrounding area. So again, it's funny. I've still never seen anything convincing that any of these armies that are coming into conflict. I mean, this city of 2 million people, before the war started, Aleppo had 2 million people, Dad. This is the city that was fought for and won. I mean, think of that. It's, bigger than San Francisco, right? A city that size being fought for and won with all of its resources now being under the control of these crazy people and all, that kind of thing going on. And there's no footage of any of that from the ground, from the people that are running from it. And as I say, all the fighting, how many people does it take to take over that kind of place? When I think of just the police force of San Francisco, if they combined all the law enforcement, call out the National Guard, get all the police in the counties and the sheriffs involved, I mean, talking thousands of human beings, thousands of well-armed, theoretically well-trained men and women coming to defend the city. So how many thousands does it take to overrun them and get them to throw down their arms and march them off to jail and all that stuff that would really take place if a city fell? So now the same city's fallen again. They're taking it back from these guys, apparently. And so anyway, this is all sort of up front, Deb, because it sets the stage for what I think is, really coming out right now, and that's the pending war with Russia. The seeds are being planted, as we talked about last week. And today it's like it's easier to understand the growing conflict, the point of contention that's going to bring this house of cards tumbling down, I think. So with that, this first article about a Western diplomat on Syria, on the Syria conflict. It'll be easy to get a ceasefire soon because the opposition will all be dead. The Syrian civil war has reached a turning point. Over the past 2 weeks, the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad seized several villages north of Aleppo, the country's largest city and one of the last remaining strongholds of Syrian non-jihadist rebels. The advance cut off Aleppo's anti-regime groups from their last remaining supply lines into Turkey and put Assad in a position to retake a fiercely contested city that had a pre-war population of over 2 million. The regime's advances, backed through an infusion of Iranian manpower and heavy Russian airstrikes around the city, come as efforts to resolve the conflict through diplomatic means have stalled in Geneva. And a recent quote from an unnamed Western diplomat shows how facile the current diplomacy really is. Quote, "It'll be easy to get a ceasefire soon because the opposition will all be dead." Reuters quoted the diplomat as saying, quote, "That's a very effective ceasefire." It's an astonishing statement that speaks volumes on the current realities in Syria. In mid-2012, opposition forces were claiming high-level defections from the government's Syrian Arab army, sweeping through major cities and gaining ground in Damascus. Now they've been so decimated that representatives of Western governments are comfortable publicly discussing the rebel movement's extermination. So I kind of want to let this article flow, Dad, but I just want to notice here that, so what we're saying is, since Russia got involved a few months ago and Iran sent some, I know we've read over time. Again, where's the footage? Show me 10,000 Iranians coming in and taking charge, and I'll say, ooh, okay, that's what's going on. But just tell me Iran sent 100 or 200 special guard. We sent a half a dozen. I mean, are you kidding me? So in this first part, over the past 2 weeks, the president, Assad's regime, the guy that has to go, and you're going to find we still got a contingent. I'm going to let the cat out of the bag and show you that we're getting close to this point of contention, Dad. He's got to go, and yet, with Russia and Iran's help, he's staying, right? He's capturing more territory back. So the last 2 weeks, his regime has seized several villages north of Aleppo. I've yet to see in all the reporting, again, this thing's been going on 5 years, and there is no even Middle Eastern young journalist that's going to win the Nobel Prize by being on the ground over there and getting some record of these wars, enough that we can get a visual to back up all this talk. I mean, it's just blowing me away. We finally get a new figure, either in this article or the next one I want to read you, that finally moves. The conflicts are still, I want to bring that out, Dad. There's some conflicts in the journalism that seems apparent to me now. The numbers finally have moved from the 250,000 killed that's been repeated over and over now. I read it again this week and I thought, geez, they've been using that number for months now and talking about all the fighting that's going on. Aren't they, aren't a few more thousand, they're just never going to bump that number. And now it's been bumped to 470,000 people have been killed in the 5 years. So, wow, it took 4.5 years to kill 250,000, but now there's been another 200,000 killed. So, I don't know. It's kind of crazy the way that reporting works. As if nobody remembers because, they just watch this stuff flash across their ticker tape news, these days, the way the news is presented in English to the English-speaking world. There's like flashes of information. 470,000 now killed. Nobody bothers to ask how 200,000 have been killed in the last few weeks. Where are they? Where's the vision of that being presented to me so I can believe it? So anyway, we've got that and this fact that these people that we've been backing since mid-2012 are now being slaughtered. I mean, isn't that what this is saying, Dad? The whole headline? It'll be easy to get a ceasefire soon because the opposition will all be dead. Well, these are the people that we've been backing, theoretically, morally, right? That's our story on the surface. Poor Syrian rebels getting the hard end of Assad's regime for too long now. They're just, they got to fight back. Isn't that what rebels do? We're not going to take it anymore. We'll fight with pitchforks and shovels like they did in Mexico 100 years ago. Get out of here. Leave us alone. So aren't we backing those people? Aren't these the rebels that we've been, us and Turkey and everybody, we're sending the people that I was screaming months ago we let get routed by ISIS in our safe zone that we declared with Turkey, 60-mile safe zone, but ISIS routed our rebels that we're supporting, which to me means slaughter, death. And so if that's the case, they slaughter this free rebel army, whoever those rebels were that we were supporting with Turkey. They must have been the good guys, right? Because we're the good guys. So we're sending these weapons. Remember, they don't come out of thin air. Do you know that, people? The government charges us to support Israel with billions, to support these countries and these rebels in their fight for democracy and freedom. We're paying the bill for that ultimately in our starving economy. So, shouldn't we be asking, hey, wait a minute, what happened? Aren't those guys important enough? You mean since mid-2012, when this rebel army that we were supporting was claiming high-level defections, right? Gaining ground even in Damascus. And now they've been so decimated that representatives of Western governments are comfortable publicly discussing the rebel movement's extermination. Holy mackerel, Dad. I mean, we started off behind the ball. Now we're just basically the superpower that can't win, right? Our team, gets exterminated, and we just, shoot. We tried. We backed those guys. But darn it, Russia came in, and we never expected that. Iran sent 200 soldiers. How are you going to fight that, ISIS took over Aleppo. We couldn't help that. I mean, who could predict they would go there and fortify those places? And now that Russia's on Assad's team, well, we're just, there's nothing we can do, see? So this is where the conflict's coming, obviously, with Russia, because they're keeping Assad in power. That's what we're going to learn is, unfortunately, the results of all this that nobody could predict, Dad. But I just think it's kind of interesting that they even talk this way about the rebels just being exterminated, right? The opposition will all be dead. And who are these opposition? High-level defections from the government's Syrian Arab army from a few years ago when these guys were trying to get rid of Assad. So we're giving up on the high-level defectors. I mean, why not? Let's let them get slaughtered. I mean, it reeks right now, Dad, of what's going on over there, if you think about it. And, of course, because this is Business Insider, whoever these guys are talking to, they got the dirt on every position. I mean, again, beautiful graphics, all the bases, areas of conflict, who's in control of all these areas. I'm just wondering how you get such accurate on-the-ground information. You can't even get a picture of any of these guys, taking any of these cities, fighting any of these people, driving any of these refugees out. I've seen so few. I talked about it last week, a few images that I've come across on the internet that actually show people that seem to be like, oh my goodness, bombs coming in, more than one, boom, 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 but there's no context for it. For all I know, that's us under the code name ISIS bombing the Shia or some other installments over there. and somebody getting pictures of it. But it seems like any other pictures have either been erased or they just don't exist. I mean, I can't think of another option. It can't be that you're losing a city over 2 million people with half of them fleeing, becoming refugees that flee into Turkey and risk their lives to flee all over the European nations and cross the Aegean Sea. And there's just a few snapshots by Western journalists. I mean, I don't know. I don't buy it, Dad. So anyway, back to this article, the quote also reflects a shift in official Western perceptions of the rebel movement's capabilities. President Barack Obama famously dismissed the Syrian rebels as, quote, former farmers or teachers or pharmacists in 2014. In spite of groups like the Free Syrian Army's success in holding strategic territory and counterbalancing the influence of jihadist groups in the country. Right? So he was already writing them off, funny enough, even as we're funding them and watching them be slaughtered and sending our money there. I mean, it's all such a conflict. You know, this is just such a pathetic idea, Dad, right? You're not behind these people on moral principles. That's why you're committing American dollars and even American lives, you know, to the case to protect the world from this madman, protect these people and the stability of the region from this madman. But now you're just, what? You're going to see, just realizing, whoops, I guess that didn't work. Let these people get slaughtered. They're just former farmers or teachers or pharmacists. What about these high-level defectors that are trying to lead the farmers and teachers and pharmacists? And Barack, what about the historical precedent just 100 years ago, coincidentally in 1914, when the farmers and teachers and pharmacists of Mexico were led by their small cadre of strategists and militarists who kicked the French out of their country and took it back for themselves. So I don't know. I just can't stand the journalism, Dad, and the lack of perspective. So what he goes on to say here now is Western policy decisions told a more complex story. Suspected CIA assistance for the Syrian rebels, matched with occasionally strong U.S. rhetoric on the need for Assad's removal, suggested that the U.S. and its partners wanted to support anti-Assad groups enough to keep the rebellion from collapsing entirely, and enough to sustain a viable non-Assad, non-jihadist alternative in case an opening for a negotiated solution to the conflict ever emerged. The diplomats, quote, all but declares that policy a failure. So it sounds to me like what he's presenting here, this journalist, is that the policy was basically to use these people temporarily to see if an opening arose. Is that what he just said? Right? Suggested that the U.S. and its partners wanted to support an anti-Assad groups enough to keep the rebellion from collapsing entirely. I mean, is that ethically supportable, Dad? I'm wondering. I mean, is that what we were saying going in on this? Were we saying we have to support these people on an ethical, moral, and we got to stick with them and we got to give them what we can? And isn't that how we get all the money out of our citizens to send over there? And now we're saying that we were just thinking we'd support them enough to keep them from collapsing entirely, just in case. Keep a viable non-Assad, non-jihadist alternative in case an opening for a negotiated solution to the conflict ever emerged. I mean, is that a bunch of horse you-know-what? I mean, how awful is this? These conflicts this week are what I see, conflict. You can use that perhaps in the title this week, Dad, toward World War III. Conflicts that are emerging right now. All of a sudden, these rebels aren't our ethical partners. We were using them to see, maybe we could, but, well, unfortunately, we can't get a ceasefire out of it. Russia's helping, Iran's helping. We're just getting our butt kicked over there. So ultimately, it was just a bad decision to spend money and try and keep these people alive. We should have just bailed on them from the start and gone another route. And what I'm going to try and present, I think, Dad, is the other route seems to be the strategy of of war, right? Because there is no other way. And right now, that seems to be where we're at, trying to prevent the war with Russia. Because that's, it's Russia that's allowed this. So Assad's not heading out. He's not even having to make a ceasefire and show up in Geneva and talk about somebody else taking his place. It's kind of the other way around. The rebels are getting their butt kicked. They got nobody to send up there to the peace talks, and he's gaining ground. So that's, again, American strategy, American money. A year of bombing ISIS over there, and this is where we're at. Okay, so I want to, this article's quite interesting because I think it brings in all the key points that we have to pay attention to. This Business Insider to me is like white collar, white trash, wag the dog propaganda. This is what they want, the non-thinking, status quo, don't take my BMW out of the driveway, just tell me who I got to kill. Just take my tax money, take my kids' future, to give the food money to who, what do I care? I got a BMW. Everything's cool for me. I'm still working, right? I think that's who's reading this, and this is what they're telling them. So the diplomats, quote, all but declares that policy a failure. In the diplomats' view, the key to peace isn't sustaining the rebel movement, it's letting Assad and his partners win. Whoa! That's a new one, huh, Dad? Really? Remember we started this is an American diplomat, a Western diplomat, that said, yeah, the ceasefire is going to be just fine. Everybody else, the opposition's about to be all dead. Which means, does that mean people aren't dying over there, Dad? How do you even say that unless you know that these poor people are getting wiped out? So we're letting the people we've been supporting, the guns, all that time and money we've spent in a year bombing, and not only did we lose Aleppo to ISIS, right, but now we're losing it back to Assad. But I think that's how they're going to present our political system this year. That's ultimately how it's going to come down in the end, is to show how Obama administration and this liberal view of trying to be Mr. Nice Guy has led to all these losses militarily, and whoever takes the reins now is going to have to be committed to a hawkish policy. Which is why, we got Russia building up arms over there, everybody building up arms, because, anyway, that's where I want to let the article speak that out this week, Dad, but that's where I'm seeing where we're at. It's sort of, we're getting to that dangerous place where, the loaded gun is on the, thrown into the center of the pit, and everybody's maneuvering for it, because once you get there and try and blow the other guy's brains out and win the game. And so I think that it's become much more tense all of a sudden, the way I see it. So I find this astounding. The key to peace isn't sustaining the rebel movements, it's letting Assad and his partners win. Because, we've been saying for years, he's got to go. There is no peace. There is no, right? And you'll find we're still saying that. So isn't that a conflict? Who's this guy? This unnamed diplomat filling this white collar, white trash source with this idea. And then, of course, another gorgeous full color graphic, because that's what white trash, white collar people are into, that shows again where everybody is. It's labeled Syrian Army Strategy, early 2016. This guy knows everybody's strategy, where everybody is. I just find it amazing, the strength of every position. You'd think if we had all that information, we could win this thing or push it in our favor, being the U.S.-led coalition for freedom and peace after all these years. Okay, so here's that conflicting number now, finally. The current military situation in Syria, that's the graphic. The quote also reflects the West's exhaustion with the Syria conflict. The West's exhaustion, right? Not these other little armies. They're not exhausted. We're exhausted. Russia, who's been under sanctions. Iran, who's just just getting sanctions lifted. They're not exhausted. We're exhausted. Western democracies. Okay, the quote also reflects the West's exhaustion with the Syria conflict, which has dragged on for over 4 years and killed an estimated 470,000 people. Dad? Woo! Don't justify that number to me because you know, journalist, that I've been reading the figure 250,000 even this week. Killed more than 250,000. This is a lot more. I mean, it's almost double. So, I don't know, Dad. You know, we're going to throw that. Well, that's the new number now we're going to see, 470. Is that going to be the new thing that kicks in? We'll see. I find that so interesting. Is that a typo? It was supposed to be 270. See, 270 would be, oh, okay, it was 250. Now it's 270. That's making some sense. Somebody's on it, and they've updated the kill numbers of the Civil War. Instead of repeating 250 all year long, they finally updated it, but 470? So either that's a typo or it's outrageous. I don't know which. The war's threat to Western democracies has increased even as the prospects for Assad's ouster wane. How's that? See, the prospects for Assad's ouster wane. Sorry, he had to go several months ago. We were so committed that, the world just has to know that the world, everyone, the people have to know the world, democracies are committed. He has to go, right? Let me read that again. The war's threat to Western democracies. So this isn't a threat to Syria or Iraq or Lebanon or these, warlords, as we try to paint them, these kind of people. We could go into Afghanistan and be there for 15 years. Go into Iraq, it's been through how many people now? We destroyed the country. But Syria, we said he had to go. We were committed. There was an army, we were told, of rebels from high-level defectors all the way down to farmers and pharmacists ready to take on Assad because that's how worthy their cause was. And that's what we got behind. And now the war's threat to Western democracies has increased even as the prospects for Assad's ouster wane. On February 5th, French ambassador to the U.S., Gerard Araud, tweeted that, quote, the Syrian civil war is becoming an existential threat to the EU, presumably because of the strain that refugees from the conflict have put on the Union's internal border control system and relations among Union member states. So the fact that these guys all voted to go to war for the right cause against this one guy, and now that they're at war, the Syrian civil war is becoming an existential threat to the EU. So, but we're just going to, Assad, we're going to have to back, what can we do? Assad wins. So don't you see how this is now, how did he win Russia and Iran? Don't you see this shaping up as the other side? But he can't win because you're going to find in another article the United States Secretary of State, John Kerry, saying that the rebel army might take a few beatings, but they will not surrender. Again, this conflict. This article's painting it like these guys are practically already being talked about as yesterday's news. Too bad. Scrap that. We tried to keep a remnant of people alive in case we could pull this off peacefully. Can't do that. Russia's in there now. Iran's in there. Who knew they'd get involved with Syria? Keep the Shias from being slaughtered. Keep their bases from being overtaken. So, darn it, they got involved. And now, doesn't matter that we've been at it for 4 years. We're just going to have to fold up shop. Realize that policy's a failure. I mean, again, Dad, failure after failure on the part of the U.S. strategists and the coalition forces and the European Union, right? So I say it's all just talk, right? This is the party line, people. This is the propaganda. That's what I call the party line. The thing that they want you to know is that the Syrian civil war is becoming an existential threat to the European Union. Probably because all these darn refugees, and we're going to hopefully get to that today, Dad, how close that refugee threat is to bursting, a bubble there that's being held back, that's close to bursting. It could be considered flippant, back to this article, Dad, it could be considered flippant to characterize the death of Syria's non-jihadist rebel movement, which is, after all, fighting a regime accused of serial human rights abuses, as a prerequisite for an effective ceasefire, quote unquote, but it might also be an accurate reflection of the current mood in the U.S. and Europe. Right, Dad? It could be considered flippant to say, yeah, well, the best way is to let these guys lose. Is that what I just read here? Right? Could be considered flippant to characterize the death of Syria's non-jihadist rebel movement. I mean, the death of the movement means the slaughter of the people that are the pharmacists and the farmers, doesn't it, journalist? Are you not pointing that out here? And they are, after all, fighting a regime accused of serial human rights abuses. So they are on the good side, after all. And so it could be considered flippant to characterize their slaughter and extermination and death as a prerequisite, Dad, for an effective ceasefire. Is that what this journalist is telling me? But it might also be an accurate reflection of the current mood in the United States and Europe. Well, boy, how powerful are we then? Really unbelievable. In any case, this article says, we're at the end, and I want to finish this moron's reporting. In any case, the quote, ceasefire, the diplomat describes, wouldn't come close to ending the Syrian civil war. So even if we slaughter all those people or let them be slaughtered, wouldn't end the civil war, which is why we should do it anyway, I suppose. Jihadist groups like ISIS and the Al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra are still among the more powerful fighting forces on the ground. It could be years before Assad fully consolidates control over Syria's populated areas, and even the reconquest of Aleppo could take the regime months or years. As the past 4 years in Syria demonstrate, turns in battlefield momentum can say surprisingly little about where the conflict is actually going. A ceasefire with even a totally decimated rebel movement might not be enough to end the country's conflict. So I find that a little creepy, Dad, that he said it several times in this article about decimating the rebel movement that supposedly is the morally correct one that we've been supporting, calling out these people from their farms and from the government and from places, they're calling these people out saying, we got the support of America, NATO, Turkey, come on, join us fighting against Assad. What's that say about us? It historically says that we're keeping our pattern alive of using people to slaughter people. So anyway, that's the first article that I think is very important this week to paint the picture of what's going on. And the other one that I think deserves a read comes from Saturday the 13th by Geir Molson, Associated Press out of Munich. And the title is Syria Truce hopes dim as Russia is skeptical. Fighting rages. Okay, remember what I told you about the peace process, Dad? Watch out when they call for a peace process nowadays. That's code for pump up the volume, right? Peace process and ceasefires and all these things mean, we're moving more weapons into place. There's going to be more fighting. Right? Come on, Dad. It hasn't stopped in my lifetime now. We've been making peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis for 20 years with the support of the entire world's resources. And we, America, who support Israel, and if it wasn't for us, they couldn't be there. So it's kind of a weird conflict, right? We want peace. Everybody wants peace. Peace has been on the table for 20 years, and instead it's been constant conflict, war, buildup of military instead. So I say peace means war in the modern vernacular when it comes from the mainstream. And so that's what I've been pointing out. Here we are now. Hopes of securing a temporary truce in Syria within a week dim Saturday as Syrian government forces tighten the noose around rebel-held parts of Aleppo, and Russia's foreign minister put the chances of a quick truce at less than 50%. His comments and strong words from U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry underscored deep U.S.-Russian disagreements over Syria. Further complicating the picture, Turkey's foreign minister said his country and Saudi Arabia may launch ground operations against the Islamic State group in Syria. Diplomats from countries with interests in Syria's 5-year civil war, it was 4-year in the last article, including the United States, Russia, Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, agreed Friday to work toward a temporary cessation of hostilities within a week. They also agreed to accelerate and expand deliveries of humanitarian aid to besieged Syrian communities beginning this week. Still, officials acknowledged from the start that the test would be turning commitments on paper into reality on the ground, and it wasn't clear whether deep differences regarding the truce and which groups would be eligible for it could be overcome. The truce deal in Munich came as Syrian government forces, aided by a Russian bombing campaign, are trying to encircle rebels in Aleppo, the country's largest city, and cut off their supply route to Turkey. Speaking Saturday at the Munich Security Conference, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov pressed to say how confident he is that a cessation of hostilities will be implemented within a week, replied 49 out of 100%. He indicated that Russia remains deeply suspicious of U.S. intentions. Remember that now. This is the first plug of all the BS. But this is all done, of course, the humanitarian need, because of course people are dying in this conflict. The locals caught in the middle are dying. They're not fleeing. They're dying there. They're starving there. They're caught between people shooting there. And they're, the humanitarian voices in the world are saying, man, you have to let us get stuff to people that need it. We don't get pictures of these people. We don't get pictures of the fighting, nothing. Just this argument and just all these weapons and the superpowers of the world in conflict with each other, with aircraft with the highest weapon, all the most modern technology. Not like in conflict, we're sending a few, troops over there with some AK-47s to keep peace. No, we're bombing. We're up to over 1,000 bombing runs. Okay, so if that's true and bombs are dropping, people are dying like crazy over there. These bombs are blowing stuff up, and there's collateral damage that even if the bombs aren't killing people, the pain that it's causing people in being able to get food and water and things like that, medical treatment, medical supplies and stuff. So, I think of my family. I have family that takes pills and has to see the doctor for certain ailments periodically. What if they can't get to the doctor? What if they can't get their pills? Right? So this kind of thing that's going on, really, and we don't see any of it but these soundbite pieces of propaganda, white trash BS out of these kind of, this is an ABC News sort of publication here. They're the ones that posted this. Okay, so Lavrov said, everyday military cooperation between the U.S. and Russia in particular is the key tool to ensuring the delivery of humanitarian supplies and to end to hostilities in Syria, but he complained that coordination hasn't gone beyond an agreement to avoid in-air incidents. Quote, if we are moving closer to practical goals of a truce, then without cooperation between the military, nothing will work out, Lavrov said. So right now they're agreeing not to shoot each other down when they're, not to shoot each other when they're delivering humanitarian aid. Pretty much that's it. But meanwhile, what that tells me, Dad, because that's what they're saying, if you read between the lines, Lavrov said every day military cooperation between the U.S. and Russia in particular is, quote, the key tool to ensuring the delivery of humanitarian supplies and an end to hostilities in Syria. So they're both in there fighting their proxy war, agreeing not to start the bigger war with each other at this time. But they each have their targets they're bombing, and that comes up in one of these next articles we have to get to about what the U.S. and Kerry is screaming about the targets. Again, all of that seems to me absurd that we weren't predicting that. If Russia, if I'm a general, if it's my job to say, hey, the Syria conflict, what's going to happen? Well, shoot, Russia's going to have to defend its territory. How's it going to do that? Well, it's probably going to do these sort of things. So the fact that we didn't even anticipate that, and then we didn't anticipate the targets and all this kind of thing, and now we're screaming about it, to me it all reeks of allowing it to reach here on purpose. So Lavrov said comments by U.S. officials raised the impression that their aim was to stop Russia's military operation in Syria while the U.S.-led coalition continues. Quote, although we are fighting the very same organizations which the UN Security Council has designated as terrorist organizations. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who negotiated the deal with Lavrov and others, said after Lavrov's pessimistic assessment about the proposed truce that, quote, we will make it work. So Kerry's committed, and yet you're going to find he also says the rebels aren't going to surrender. So, all of this just says perpetual conflict to me, Dad. We have a reason for perpetual conflict, and it's going to come out of the mouth of Russia this week about the perpetual conflict. He repeated allegations, this is Kerry, repeated allegations that Russian airstrikes in Syria have not been directed at terrorists, but rather at moderate opposition groups supported by the U.S. and its European and Arab partners. Kerry also said Russia would have to change tactics if the agreement for a temporary truce in Syria is to actually take effect in the planned framework. Yeah, but Kerry, why would that matter if, like what this other diplomat's telling us, your rebels are getting their butt kicked and Assad's regime is conquering them with Russia's help, so why would they change their tactics? Everything seems to be working according to plan for Russia. He's getting territory back with his ally. And our guys are losing it after they already lost it to ISIS. I've never read where the rebels took Aleppo from ISIS. I guess, yeah, that's what's been going on, right? The last couple of months, Dad. Suddenly, this 2 million city, just these rebels that are now being decimated by Assad's regime, first were able to get ISIS out of there. Is that what I'm to understand? We're helping the rebels in Turkey, and they're taking Aleppo from ISIS, driving ISIS out, but now Assad's driving us out with Russia's help. And all that time, we're just screaming that we're going to make it work. And we're saying that Russia's bombing the wrong people. But if, in our opinion, Russia's attacks have been against legitimate opposition groups, is that not to say they're bombing our stuff? Even if they're not killing our people, they're bombing our stuff, our assets, the stuff we're trying to protect, the guns we're sending, the armaments we're sending, and the facilities we're sending them to, or are being used by the people we're sending them to. If they're bombing those, they're hurting us, right? So what would we be doing if ISIS was bombing those? If somebody, I don't get it. We're just yelling about it instead of demanding that, like, we wouldn't allow ISIS to be bombing our stuff, would we? So it seems to me, Dad, still this weird setup that they just keep allowing it. Just like, remember, in the days after World War II, they just gave Eastern Europe to Russia. They gave it to Stalin. And you find, if you believe the prediction for the 3 world wars, they did that to balance the hand, to get there to be enough communist atheist governments to balance all the people running Christian governments. throughout Europe. So, interesting. I mean, just keep in mind that maybe they can do that. So Kerry said, if people who want to be part of the conversation are being bombed, we're not going to have much of a process. And then he says, the opposition may be pushed back here and there, but they are not going to surrender. So I find all of this so conflicting. This one also goes on to say Syria's wars killed 250,000 people, wounded more than 1 million, and displaced half the country's population. 500,000 Syrians were among the 1 million refugees who flowed into Europe last year in the biggest migration the continent has seen since World War II. Neighboring Turkey is hosting at least 2.5 million refugees from Syria. Turkey's foreign minister was quoted in the Yeni Şafak newspaper Saturday as saying that, quote, Turkey and Saudi Arabia may launch an operation from the land against IS, which holds a swath of Syrian territory. I said, a swath of territory, Dad. What is that? Is that farmland? I mean, Aleppo, when they held Aleppo, that's 2 million people. That's a big city. They're saying these guys controlled the taxes. And are they taxing the sheep out on the farmland? You know, the swath of Syrian territory. I mean, come on, journalists, tell me what the key locations in that swath are. An operation from the land to get back what locations out of this swath of land. It says Saudi Arabia is, quote, ready to send both jets and troops to Turkey's Incirlik Air Base. And a ground operation is possible if there is, quote, an extensive results-oriented strategy. We're going to kill a lot of people. Right, Dad? Isn't that what that said? An extensive results-oriented strategy. If we can kill a lot of people in the fight against Islamic extremists. Incirlik is now being used by the U.S.-led coalition in the campaign against IS. So this, to me, this article brings in everything, you know, the conflict in numbers, 250,000. I mean, I don't know, Associated Press, haven't they bumped the numbers up? I still don't get it. Okay, so 500,000 people, this one says, of the million, 500,000 have flowed into Europe in the biggest migration since World War II. I'm not sure, you know, nobody talks about, are the rest coming there? We're talking ceasefire, aren't we? We're talking political solution. You know, we're talking, one of the reasonable voices is talking about even Merkel saying, well, you know, these people, some of them are going to want to go back to Syria. So they're still presenting now, though, 2.5 million in Turkey. See, of course, most of these are the ones that are waiting to go back. They don't want to go to Europe, or they find a way out, or they can't because they're too poor and they're bound to stay in Turkey. So either way, they're going home or they're staying in Turkey, so Europe doesn't have to worry about them. They can't make it to Europe out of Turkey, a lot of them. But Turkey's now threatening. It's one of the big articles this week that I hope I get to. I'll try and at least mention the headline, Dad. That Turkey's threatening. So now, let's see about marching through a few of these to draw the strings together, because I find that this sort of brings up everything that to me is so important. The Turkey-Saudi Arabia link, right? NATO's, I mean, you know, who are these people? Where are the guns coming from that these guys are ready to send both jets and troops, right? Turkey's NATO's boy, and, you know, the money that when we sell weapons to these people, are, you know, we're sure they're going into the moderate hands of friendlies, and there are weapons, and the Israeli weapons, as far as the people that are responsible for those weapons, and the sale is on us. And so that just plays such a big, you know, it's such a big role in this picture of the end, the way I'm seeing it. You know, Turkey and Saudi Arabia now ready to march together. You're starting to get this idea of a, you know, remember, that's sort of the old power structure, maybe even the current one, in the sense that that's the one we back in the Islamic world. They may not be the most respected, and there's that schism throughout the Islamic world about who ought to run the people, as far as a caliph or a leader, a single leader and a single sort of people. But they're still obviously the most powerful militarily in the region. And so this is all playing out again into this, I find, that this week with Turkey threatening. Let's just go to that article next. Erdogan threatens to send refugees to EU as NATO steps in. This is out of the AFP from February 11th by Burak Akinci and Stuart Williams in Istanbul. February 11th, AFP article. Turkish President Erdogan has threatened to send the millions of refugees in Turkey to EU member states as NATO pledged to deploy ships to the Aegean to ease the migrant crisis. Because, of course, the EU's been sending Erdogan money. He's asking for more money, and I don't know the details to know who's extorting who for more, right? He's obviously a player in all this. They don't tell me these strategists didn't know this war and how long it was going to be and what they were, especially if it's being sort of, strings are being pulled in the background, as I suspect, and it's being done towards some end game where they know there's going to be a third world war. Russia and America are going to go after each other, and these satellite countries are going to come in on different sides. If they know all that and they're pulling all these strings, and they know this, the refugee crisis was not only predicted but is being manipulated and used to benefit this larger plan. And so Turkey's part of that as a NATO member. And everybody, remember, I don't picture everybody sitting in a room, okay, like a football team. Here's what we're all going to do. When I say strings pulling, I mean the bankers that send them their money say, this is what we want. And of course, these national interests have what they want out of it. Yeah, you can have my people, you can have my resources, you can have our allegiance. We want our power in the region. We want to get richer. We want to get stronger. We want our enemies crushed. Right? Wouldn't that be what you wanted? It always has been. Go back and read scripture from the time of Daniel. It's all you want. Ultimately, you want your power and strength to increase as an empire, and the strength and power of your enemies to decrease around you. It's ultimately what makes an empire comfortable, so that it can make money and keep implementing the sort of policies it wants on its citizens, whether those are, good or bad, benevolent or whatever policies, whether to rape the people or give to the people. You can't do either if you're at war with your neighbors. So, Turkey's in this completely stable position, isn't it, Dad? They're pulling their line. They're holding on to the refugees. They're marching into Syria. We use their air bases. I mean, don't tell me they're not expecting something out of all this. It's why they get to be such a hard line, right? They're blowing up Russian airplanes. Are you kidding me? I would have never thought that, right? I would have never thought that was in the realm of, it's one thing to blame it on terrorists. It's another to the country of Turkey. Their military officially took down a Russian jet, and they don't have to pay for that in the sense of a military response. Russia's not in there bombing the crud out of them, blowing up 10 times as much material value, at least, as a response. I mean, they did. They responded in the way of the sanctions on them. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, wow, okay, just went and shot down a Russian plane. Saudi Arabia is just funding genocide or whatever, this civil war in Yemen. Cluster bombs, also inhumane acts, all this kind of stuff. Right? Nobody says a word. It just goes on silently every day. And I've read again this week. The Yemen, it's still going. Now, don't think because I don't talk about it especially it doesn't wind up in your headlines. I'll tell you when something new happens in Yemen that I find out about. But for now, they're killing each other in Yemen. So yeah, Turkey It says, interesting, Turkey, already home to some 3 million refugees, is also under EU and UN pressure to take in tens of thousands of Syrian refugees fleeing regime advances in the Aleppo region. Erdogan said Turkey had every right to turf the refugees out of the country if it so wished. Quote, we do not have the word idiot written on our foreheads. We will be patient, but we will do what we have to. Don't think that the planes and the buses are there for nothing, Erdogan said. In November, Erdogan made the threat to the EU Commission. We can open the doors to Greece and Bulgaria anytime and put refugees on buses. So, right, this is the pressure point going on there. The EU has agreed to give Ankara 3 billion euros in financial aid for the refugees, but the funds have yet to be handed over 2.5 months after they were agreed. You might see why a little threats coming out in the thing now, huh, Dad? It's probably not all about the money. Erdogan said Turkey had already spent some 9 billion on hosting refugees and lashed out at the UN for pressing it to let in tens of thousands more. So I'm just saying, big pressure point there, Dad, in the world right now. And Turkey being run by NATO means it's a NATO-controlled pressure point. Does NATO ultimately, what do? Do they send the refugees on Europe to get a response that way? Do they cause terror in Turkey to push the popular movement that way, right? Anything's possible over there. And so right now it's just a pressure point threat, okay? So I sort of covered this in the other article, but out of AP on Saturday, no journalists given credit. It says Turkish media say Saudi Arabia, Turkey may strike in Syria. So it's official that what they're talking about is coming together to move against IS in Syria. What I haven't found in any of these articles, Dad, is where's IS now? I mean, they're not in Aleppo. Now it's the Free Rebel Army, but no, we're not able to support that to at least keep Syria out of there. Tell Russia, hey, we're taking Aleppo. It's the Free Syrian rebels who got ISIS out of there, not you. You're not coming and taking it from the rebels. So I find this a weird position that I wouldn't expect as the superpower, as America, as the money, the interest, the rhetoric that's gone on over the reason for this whole support of the rebels in the Civil War, as I said. They were gassed, we were told. Chlorine gas, sarin gas, we find out it was the rebels that were sending it the other way. But I'm saying on the surface story of the propaganda, you'd think that, hey man, these guys, we can't give up on these guys. So anyway, Turkey and Saudi Arabia say they may strike in Syria. Is that saber rattling? I don't think so, because I think that, wars and rumors of wars, everything's got to escalate now. And I want to get to something, Dad, the bigger point. I'm just saying, look at what I've been saying now for weeks, Turkey in the news, right? And its prominent position as Gog in the prophecy and as that place of Constantinople from history, where the original center of the Greek Orthodox Church was at Hagia Sophia for 1,000 years before the Catholic money was able to overcome it through funding of the Ottoman Empire, and the treacheries that went on, turning it into a mosque and taking those Eastern Orthodox Christian children when they'd win a battle and making them give children as part of the booty, and then converting these children to Islam and making them their supreme fighters, the ones that went out and slaughtered now their Christian relatives when they went back later, right? That's what these people were doing. Now, that was all funded by the Vatican to do that. So, these are the wounds that move forward into the modern world. Give us the modern history and the tensions that have developed since then. So, but this is how strong Turkey is, that they've been on the funding, that place has been a central force in the modern world since before it was even the modern world. So anyway, Turkey's going to continue to be very important, and it's, and here they are declaring that they're going to join Saudi Arabia and moving against ISIS, which we know is BS, because to me that means moving against Shia positions, right? We're ready to get this ground force going. We've loosened it up enough with the air campaign, and now it's time to get the ground force going. Because there is no IS. IS is a mercenary army killing Shias over there. They are the ground force up to this point. So this is Turkey and Saudi Arabia joining the Islamic State ground force, is what it sounds like to me. It's presented to us as going against them in the swaths of land, which means anywhere, which means we don't even have to, we're not even pinpointing anything. It's just BS. Okay, is what I see, Dad. Means the pressure, we're going to get more ground wars now. Turkey and Saudi Arabia, there's going to be more war coming, okay? This we sort of talked about. Also an unnamed AFP article from Saturday. Russia's Syria military targeting must change, according to Kerry. We talked about that. It's funny, all these independent articles, right, Dad? They've all got the same few words. They're quoting the same. Kerry, as far as I know, Kerry only said 3 or 4 sentences about this whole issue this week. All the others, there's 15 different articles coming at it from different angles, quoting the same passage from Kerry about they got to change the target and we're going to work together, and right, the same. In other words, they've got the one conversation, and everybody's quoting the few quotes out of that conversation or that soundbite that he put out, and that's it. Our Secretary of State, that's all there is to get out of him for what's really going on this week. So this one, I don't have to reread the article, but to point out there is a separate article from Saturday titled Russia's Syria military targeting must change. But none of it points out, what we would do. Okay, I have to read this part because I think it's important. This is obviously from the same Kerry quotes, because obviously if people who are ready to be part of the political process are being bombed, we're not going to have much of a conversation. Kerry stressed this was the crucial moment in a 5-year war that's claimed more than 250,000 lives. Again with the 250, right, Dad? Quote, "This is the moment. This is a hinge point," he said. "Decisions made in the coming days and weeks and a few months could end the war in Syria or could define a very difficult set of choices for the future." End quote. This is Secretary of State John Kerry. I'm going to read that again. This is the moment. This is a hinge point, he said. "Decisions made in the coming days and weeks and a few months could end the war in Syria or could define a very difficult set of choices for the future." He added, "The war in Syria has now lasted for almost 5 years and shows no signs of burning itself out, which is why we are so focused on a political track. This is back to his quote, "If the international community and the Syrians themselves miss the opportunity now before us to achieve that political resolution to the conflict, the violence, the bloodshed, the torture, the bombing, and the anguish will continue. So will the siren call to jihad." End quote. So that's our Secretary of State telling us what's going to happen, I think, Dad. If the international community and the Syrians themselves miss the opportunity, which we appear to be missing, because if you go to the quote before, the war in Syria has now lasted for almost 5 years and shows no signs of burning itself out, which is why we're so focused on a political track. We'll contrast that against the idea that the rebels are being destroyed by Assad's army led by Russia and Iran, so that there's no one there. The ceasefire is only a ceasefire because the people to talk to on the other side are dead, just like what he's saying here. If the people that are ready to be part of the political process are being bombed, we're not going to have much of a conversation. And then he says that the rebels aren't going to surrender. I don't get what all that means without giving a commitment that, hey, we're going to support them. Oh, you'll see, they're going to take Aleppo. They're going to keep Aleppo. We're going to up our ante in Aleppo. The Russians better know that we're getting to the table right now because we're going to support the rebels in Aleppo. And we don't want any conflict with you, Russia. So you better back off Aleppo. No, none of that talk. So who's coming to this peace conference, Kerry? I don't think anybody. Decisions made in the coming days and weeks and a few months could end the war in Syria or could define a very difficult set of choices. This is what I think is unfortunately what's coming. And then he goes on to say, the war in Syria has now lasted almost 5 years, shows no sign of burning itself out. If the international community, I don't understand why the choices then were so focused on a political track. Isn't he aware that, first of all, nobody gives credence to the people he's calling politically viable? The rest of the world's pointing at them as terrorists. And the few rebels are being slaughtered and defeated, as we're reading this week. See, I don't get it, Dad. I see this terrible conflict within our highest, the few people, the few sentences from our highest ranking people are all in conflict. I mean, that to me is what is showing up this week really as strong as anything else. Here's an interesting one from our friend the Business Insider by Jeremy Bender. I believe this was on Saturday, maybe Friday. The title is, "This Amazing Graphic Shows All of the Russian Navy's Submarines." And I read the article, and it essentially talks about their three categories of submarine, the diesel-electric powered, the nuclear-powered ballistic missile, and the nuclear-powered attack, and how they go different depths, at different speeds, and different purposes, and how theirs is second only to ours. And partially because of that, because I think they mention in this Cold War era sort of strategies. And there was one more article I wanted to mention. Russia warns of new Cold War as East Ukraine violence surges. This is a Reuters article on Saturday by Robin Emott and Shadia Nasrallah. And Russia's accusing America and NATO of dragging the world back. I feel like I have to read just a few pieces of this, Dad. Violence in eastern Ukraine is intensifying, and Russian-backed rebels have moved heavy weaponry back to the front line, international monitors warned on Saturday, as Moscow responded by accusing the West of dragging the world back 50 years. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev described East-West relations as having, quote, fallen into a new Cold War, unquote, and said NATO was, quote, hostile and closed toward Russia, in the latest sign that peace efforts have made scant progress almost 2 years since Moscow annexed Crimea. I sometimes wonder, are we in 2016 or 1962? Medvedev asked in a speech to the Munich Security Conference. I'll just stop there right now, Dad, for time, but to me, though, just what just transpired in those couple of remarks is quite eerie again to me. 1962, wasn't that the year right before the Cuban Missile Crisis? Bay of Pigs, I mean, wasn't that the moment when the world was on the brink of nuclear war? Interesting. And so you're telling me NATO would even be able to be accused by anybody nowadays of being hostile and closed toward Russia, so that we're all on the brink of nuclear war. And that's what I'm getting out of this. Why would we fall into a new Cold War? Why, with all the years since 1989 and the fall of Russia and the smart kids we got coming out of college and the social historians and the sort of real perspective that's been investigated, as through all the institutes and the think tanks. It's not like nobody asked the questions. I'm really got to keep bringing that up. Who funded that? Who allowed that? Who allowed Russia to be so strong that here we are, 1962 again, Dad? But I find that interesting, and so I should plug old Sheikh Imran Hossein for a moment. That I was just listening to one of his most recent lectures, and he's calling for, in his anticipation, he says we're within a year or two of nuclear war. He just sees that that's where they're going over here with this. Because in his eschatological view, through the Islamic eschatology, right, the Armageddon, the Malhama, is it's just a part of it. To Christians, it's the climax. Jesus returns and it's over. To Islam, see, the return of Jesus, quite accurately, follows Armageddon. So the rise to Armageddon is what he's watching. And he imagines that the Jews have to become more powerful, that the false Messiah can claim, I'm the false Messiah and ready to rule the world, rather than the way I see it is that's all being prepared. They don't have to already have the world under their feet and then he say, I'm the Messiah. They can claim that and then go conquer the world. So we're both very close, but we're approaching it from those ends. So that's why he sees a nuclear war coming to sort of facilitate that in the next couple of years, so that Armageddon will take place. The Messiah can then claim, I'm the Messiah of the Jews. The Mahdi can come back and defeat him. So he's seeing it happen very soon now, and I'm just wanting to point out that here you got the Prime Minister of Russia describing East-West relations as having fallen into a new Cold War, and that NATO is hostile and closed toward Russia. Well, isn't that friggin' intelligent? I mean, boy, I'm sure glad we pay these lawyers and we make them our heroes and, right, our politicians and our, the leaders of our colleges and all the things that these smart people run, right? I'm so glad, because in 25 years they brought us from a crippled Russia, a single superpower, a pledge to a non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, to rid the world of weapons, to bring the world toward peace, to feed the world, to make it a better place. Boy, have they failed, haven't they? Son of a gun. Who are these guys? I wish somebody'd do some journalism and point out who they are. Who are the people that gave us the world we have when they had the power 25 years to give us the world they told us they were working toward? What didn't work? Exactly. That's what I'd like to know. But I'm not sure you're going to see anything like that, or would even be allowed to come across those numbers. One other thing's interesting this week, Dad, if I've got just a couple of minutes, out of the AFP from Saturday. U.S. approves F-16 sale to Pakistan. Of course. Why wouldn't we? United States said Friday it approved selling up to 8 Lockheed Martin F-16 fighter jets to Pakistan, along with training, radar, and other equipment worth a total of $699 million. Shoot, that's quite a bargain. Less than $100 million a F-16. I wish I could have one. Training and radar and other equipment. Can you imagine? Donald Trump could have his own F-16. So yeah, and I didn't know Pakistan had so much cash, like they were good for it. 700 million. What do they need it for? Well, you find out. Quote, this proposed sale contributes to U.S. foreign policy objectives and national security goals by helping to improve the security of a strategic partner in Southeast Asia, it said in a statement. Of course, the arch enemy, India, said, we're not happy about it, right? It's too bad. Display there. We disagree, says India's foreign ministry spokesman. We disagree with their rationale that such arms transfers help to combat terrorism. So anyway, yeah, I just see, Dad, this is more my picture I want people to see. Somebody's loaning, don't think somebody's not giving the people this money to have these weapons instead of food and gold and, things of some value for their country. Spend their money on something real. $700 million so they can have, weapons of mass destruction to protect them against who, Dad? India. Well, where do India get their weapons of mass destruction, Dad? Does India make that stuff? Why does India have weapons of mass destruction to fight against Pakistan? And why do we keep selling both of them more? Why does the United Nations, bent on ridding the world of weapons, keep approving that what we'll do through the International Monetary Fund is we'll keep loaning you money so you can buy more weapons? From who? Same people that, that we're a part of. The weapons makers, basically us. We'll loan you money so you can buy more weapons from us. Son of a gun. What a great system for them, right? See, the point is, though, you wouldn't do that if you didn't think they could turn the weapons on you. So you do it because you're already in a divide and conquer sort of context, I believe. You've already got them turning the weapons on each other. India, you need more weapons because Pakistan's getting stronger. And now Pakistan, what are you going to do about India having more weapons? They're getting stronger. Hey, we can't help what they do with their money. It's their money. India does a lot of tea business. You know what I mean? They got some extra cash. They want nuclear weapons. They want F-16s, just in case Pakistan comes across the border with sticks and stones. Now, Pakistan, you got a lot of stuff too. Right? I don't see what you're going to do with that money if India comes across your border. You better up the ante. More F-16s. Keep those Indians in check. I mean, who promotes that kind of world if you're the one doing the promoting? If you've got the funds, you're the one out doing the fund, the fundraising and the fund distributing and sitting around in your international councils talking about how should we, who should we give this money to and for what? Well, we could give it to India to buy some nuclear weapons, develop a, nuclear weapon program. Strategic against who, Dad? We defeated everybody. We're the superpower. What did we need India to have weapons for? Against who? See? No, because then you need to sell Pakistan weapons. All right? Yemen, North Korea, these countries with no money. But they got a beef against their neighbor who happens to be well funded with arms. So yeah, North Korea, unless you want to be overrun by those South Koreans, same sort of civil war thing, right? Have that sect of people slaughter your sect of people. Then I don't know what you're going to do with all that money you get from selling your rice and your other goods, but I suggest buying weapons to protect yourself against South Korea. I don't know, Dad. It's, that ugly thing and no journalism really pointing out to us what a simple case of shutting down the weapon sales, right? The UN sort of making a limit on who gets weapons and why. Heck, let's have a council on why are we selling these? How come we're not asking people to reduce their weapons in order to get more money from us? Yeah, we'll give you more money, India. We'll give you a lot more money. You willing to put down a bunch of your weapons so that we can ask Pakistan to put down a bunch of their weapons too? And both you guys will become you'll still have enough to kill each other, but you'll have less weapons. You can kill less of each other at a time, and it's better for the whole world. And we'll loan you money for other things if you'll do that. I mean, well, how easy would that be, Dad? And then if you did the tactics we're using to support the political systems that wanted to go along with that program. I want weapons instead. I want to kill our enemies. Okay, well then let's put our money into the other political process, the other political party that says, yeah, I like that. I'll go along with reducing our arms and spending our borrowed money from the IMF on food and shelter and education. I'll go along with that program. Think of how easy it would be to have every one of these countries in line, borrowing their money to spend on their people for the good of their people, for the more universal goods that everybody's looking for, right? The sanitation so diseases don't spread, medical so their people don't die an unethical sort of death, all those kind of programs that would be fairly easy to support if you look at the military budgets of all these little countries like North Korea, Yemen, Pakistan, India, not to mention the North African countries. I don't know where in the world they get the money to keep putting bullets in those guns. It just really angers me, Dad, because I know, unfortunately, where they get the money. It's the only reason their political powers get to stay in power is because they're willing to borrow the money from the IMF and spend the money on bullets from essentially the same people. Okay, so let's see. Is there time for one more? No. I'll just give you the headline of this one out of Reuters. On Friday, there was an article titled, Islamic State can only be defeated if Assad goes, said the Saudi minister. This is on Friday, Dad, amidst all this stuff about Assad taking Aleppo, about going to this Geneva conference where the peace, how they're going to talk about a political solution. Again, talk about a conflict, right? And if you read this article, it's just stirring the pot, right? It's just pointing out that they've got to keep fighting to get rid of him. So there's this huge faction of people that's going to continue essentially what I see is the civil war end of it. Saudi, Turkey, they're the Sunni end right now. See, that's why I guess they're saving the Hashemite king for his time to be the solution. But at the moment, it's this, we're using the Sunni money, the Sunni bodies to get in there now, get the ground troops going against the Shias. Anyway, and it's all pointing toward this game where we're allowing the context to be conflict with Russia. They're not backing down. They're bombing the wrong targets. They need to budge, but they're not budging because they're winning. And I see I don't feel that because of the prophetic view that we've had all these years, Dad, that it can bring about nuclear war that quickly, as Sheikh Imran says. I don't believe that. I believe that it's the staving off of nuclear war, just like in 1963. That's what we're coming for, is a replay of that scenario where, wipe our eyebrow, we barely made it. Wow, that was close. Let's not do that. Let's all talk. Look, let's rebuild the temple. Let's get along. We finally got a good caliph fighting the bad guys until, of course, the tension is already there. And it only takes a spark to set off the fire at that point, just like it would have all through the 70s and 80s when we were afraid of nuclear war with Russia. Any spark, anybody's accidental encounter could set off this war. And you can just go back and look up how many articles from all your favorite journalist rags were centered on how close we were and the potential for war and how high it was, and oh my goodness, and no one's ever been this close, and how are we ever going to get out of this? And if we do, how are we never going to let ourselves get back here? Well, here we are. So anyway, Dad, here we are. And thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. Happy Valentine's Day to Mom and to all the mothers and sweethearts out there. Okay. Love you, Dad. Talk to you next week.
Well, Tony, I think you're exactly right. And it was another superb analysis of this week's happenings in the news in the Middle East. And folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. And give us a little feedback. Go to BroSal.org on YouTube or the Philadelphian Church on YouTube. And comment, drop us a line, subscribe. And if you like what you're hearing and you want this to continue, drop us a frankincense offering. There's a button right up on the right-hand corner of the title to keep this ministry and the word coming to you. And for Tony, I'm Brother Sal. Till next week, we want you to have a great day in Christ. Thank you.